What do you think of when you hear the words pixel art? Do you think retro games for consoles from the 4th generation? Do you think indie games from amateur developers who can't afford 3D graphics and assets? Do you think cheap and lazy? Or do you think time-consuming, intentional, and artistic? From the outside, those inexperienced with creating pixel art usually think it's the easy route for creating graphics for your game. They think pixel art games are lazy, unrefined, uninspired, and cheap. Now, I can tell you firsthand, creating even mediocre pixel art, like myself, is anything but easy, and it's definitely not lazy. Especially if you aren't the most skilled artist, and even if you are skilled, pixel art can still be very time-consuming and difficult, even more so than hand drawing. For someone like myself, a person who has, let's call it, questionable art skills, but a very basic understanding of animation, pixel art gives me the ability to create passable art. It's still time-consuming, but I honestly could never create anything remotely as good-looking if I had to hand draw it using the traditional approach. So how can pixel art assist those who have weak artistic skills while still challenging those who have traditional art abilities? Well, it's the same thing. It's the ability to place individual pixels. For the inexperienced person like myself, being able to place individual pixels means I don't have to worry about the lines that I draw, meaning I can go back and fix any of my mistakes at any time with no consequence. My line work is easily one of my weakest points in my ability to draw. For anyone who understands art, you know line quality is a major skill to learn. For the skilled artist, this ability to place individual pixels leads them down a path of meticulously placing individual pixels to create these complex animations, usually with many colors. And with the more colors that you add, the more complex your pixel art and the entire process becomes. This is partially why I went with a 1-bit art style for hand cannon, though limitations do come with their own challenges. But I promise you, those challenges are not as complicated as using a more complex color palette, while still trying to make your art look good when you're not experienced. So how did pixel art get this rap as being a lesser medium for video game art? Well, first, I think it's because pixel art is being associated with older consoles. In the 5th generation, after gamers were introduced to 3D games at home, gamers no longer wanted to see 2D games. This led to Symphony of the Night being overlooked and received poorly early on by some media outlets because of its 2D art style. This led to Symphony of the Night being perceived as old and dated by some media outlets, while the N64 version of Castlevania was praised for its modern 3D take. In hindsight, the N64 game has aged poorly, both mechanically and visually, while Symphony of the Night is a cherished gem with a timeless art style that many indies and even some AAAs still try to duplicate today. This should have taught all of us that pixel art has its merits, and for some of us, I think it truly did. But for a large majority of the gamers, and even some parts of the industry, I think they've retained those biases. The next reason why I think this view exists is because no modern pixel art game has ever been $60 or $70. Pixel art games are always considered budget titles, despite them sometimes providing more content than 3D games. Terraria and Stardew Valley can both be played for triple-digit hours, but both of them are under $15. Owlboy looks better than most AAA games, but costs less than a third of any modern AAA release. The same can be said for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, and even Sonic Mania, which is a flagship franchise from a major company. This undervaluing of games with this art style results in gamers feeling like any game made with this style is lesser than a 3D game, even if the 3D game is mediocre or bad. We are starting to see some pushback on this trend, with titles like Blasphemous 2 being priced at $30, but it's slow moving, to say the least, and I'm not sure if the average gamer will ever see the tool as equal. If Blasphemous was a 2.5D game, I don't think the average gamer would bat an eye at a $60 or $70 price tag. But because the game is pixel art, the average gamer sees $30 and begin to look questionably at the game and wonders, how can a pixel art game cost so much? I mean, just Google Blasphemous 2 and expensive and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Then we have the games that start out as 2D and go 3D. For my examples, I won't include franchises that started prior to the modern 3D era. Instead, let's look at Hyper Light Drifter and Risk of Rain. These are both games that started out as 2D pixel art games. Great 2D games, by the way. Now, both of their sequels are full-on 3D games. And this change was likely made because they know that they would reach a larger audience by bringing the game into the third dimension and ditching the pixel art aesthetic. Even I'm a bit guilty of this, as I eventually want to make a full 3D hand cannon game, though I would prefer that 3D series to coexist alongside my 2D games. And most studios do this for the exact reason that I've already stated, which leads into the last problem with pixel art. So many modern indies feature bad pixel art. I don't even mean bad like the way that hand cannon features bad pixel art. By bad, I mean lazy and uninspired art. I won't point out any game specifically, but the vast majority of modern pixel art games are done by amateurs and hobbyists, and they select pixel art because it's the most accessible way to start video game art. Those games usually feature rather flat sprites, lacking textures. They have no understanding of how to add detail to sprites without making them appear messy and overcrowded. They usually contain a lot of repetitive tile sets, and I think you get my point. Amateur games flood Steam and other platforms, and this is usually what people think when someone first mentions pixel art. Also, it doesn't take much research to learn that most of these games usually go on to sell less than 100 copies and make less than $1,000. They're not serious commercial ventures, so when you think of pixel art, you shouldn't think of those sorts of games. Instead, you should judge the games that come from studios and developers that are capable of producing quality pixel art. And those studios that are capable of those higher production values should continue to make games within that style, rather than moving on to 3D immediately after once their budget is able to grow. It's definitely a big disservice to the medium when doing so. So how do we fix this perception of pixel art and rehabilitate its public image? Well, first, I think it's on the game developers to create pixel art games that not only look great, but also play great. This is where studios that have a great style should stick with it rather than trying to enter into the third dimension. And this is also where I ask those solo and indie devs who want to throw their 5-month project onto Steam to take a critical look at the work that they're producing. I know everyone on the internet tells you to create fast, fail fast, and eventually you'll get better and you'll create a hit. But as I've said before, does everything really need to be attached to some sort of monetary value? I've always created games and released them for free. Hand cannon is my actual first commercial venture. If your games aren't up to snuff, and you're likely only going to make maybe a couple $100 for your game, maybe it's just better to release on itch instead, and avoid Steam altogether. That way you can at least avoid the $100 fee and not crowd up the store. Second, we need to see more major studios revitalize the style for modern games. We're getting that new Marvel Cosmic Invasion game, and the new Terminator game, but I would love to see more. Maybe an arcade-style football or basketball game from EA, a Fallout D-make from Bethesda, or even a new Metal Slug. Lastly, gamers as a whole need to respect the medium. Now, I'm obviously not talking about everyone. There are definitely those of us who understand and appreciate the effort that goes into pixel art, but not all of us are this way. Instead of complaining online when a new pixel game seems a bit too expensive than what you're used to, maybe instead ask yourself if you would have the same complaints if this game was 2.5D or even 3D, and then ask yourself why you believe this game is no longer worth the asking price. And if it's just because the lack of a Z-axis, or because you can see individual pixels, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your line of thinking. Pixel art games are just as valid as hand-drawn, anime-style, realistic 3D, and cel-shaded 3D games, and anything else that I may have missed. I just hope the mainstream gaming audience eventually starts to notice. But that's it for today, everyone. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your time.